Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut FLEXpectations. We're here every week to look ahead into the world of boxing and just see if we can predict the future a little bit, which is a lot harder at the moment with the coronavirus pandemic turning everything, including the boxing world, upside down. Some positive news though, in that this week especially a lot of promoters and industry insiders are now starting to talk a bit more seriously about what a return to live boxing would look like. And I say that in a certain tone because it won't be live, at least initially, in front of crowds. It will be a case of behind closed doors. That seems to be the indication from all the promoters. Perhaps renting out TV studios and being able to put on several events in a week, as some promoters have alluded to. But smaller shows, because obviously without a live crowd and selling tickets, it's not as important to have 9-10 fights or more and making it a stacked undercard. You could instead split it up into 3 shows with 3 fights each or whatever. You get the idea. So we might see a lot more of that. We might see a real glut of televised boxing to get people out and to get the sport back on the rails, if you like. I read an article this week by Steve Kim on ESPN. I advise you all to go and have a look at it, where he spoke to some of the main broadcasters and promoters in the sport about how and when they see boxing coming back. And while everyone was relatively cautious, it did seem like the beginning of July, end of June seems overly ambitious. Beginning of July, we'd probably start seeing behind closed doors shows. But in terms of big fights this year, that's where the real problem lies. And I hate to be negative, but it's something that does need to be addressed. Oscar De La Hoya, head of Golden Boy Promotions, of course, and living legend, said in his part of that Steve Kim article that he thinks that some fighters will need to kind of address their own expectations regarding purses. Obviously, people have got less money to spend if fights have to take place behind closed doors. There'll be no gate money, only TV money. Eddie Hearn, on the other hand, I mean, he agrees that it's an issue, but he said that the impression he's got from fighters so far indicates that they feel it's the promoter's problem. You know, they want to get similar money to that they've always had. And if there's no crowd to compensate, it's the promoter's job to find a way around it. Now, a few people in the article also alluded to whether TV companies would step up and put some more cash in. But given they've not been able to show any live sport for the last few months and lost revenue as a result, Sky Sports in the UK, for example, allowed all their subscribers to put their accounts on pause while live sport was in its hiatus, enforced hiatus. So they've lost revenue. I don't think they're then going to put extra money in for a sport that is going to lack the atmosphere it's had previously because of the lack of crowd. So it's problematic, and it could be that Tyson Fury trouncing Deontay Wilder for the WBC heavyweight title in February, which seems like a million years ago now, it was actually only 2 months ago, I think, could be the biggest fight of 2020. If you go through the weights and look at the big fights that were scheduled, you've obviously got Inoue Casimero, pretty good fight, probably not a mega fight. That may still go ahead this year. But then you go further up, Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez, which is pretty much for the undisputed world lightweight title, although, you know, there's some issues with the WBC making Loma the franchise champion. That's still a huge fight. Lopez, of course, coming off that destructive victory over Richard Commey. And, Lomachenko being one of the biggest and best, not biggest, sorry, but one of the biggest stars and one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport today. Lopez came out earlier this week and said he's not interested in fighting with no crowd. So, and he accepts that might mean he has to take some time off, but that seems to put that fight in jeopardy, at least for 2020, because I don't see it taking place in front of a live crowd unless it's at the very end of the year. So maybe that's still possible, but it's not looking likely anytime soon. Terence Crawford against Errol Spence, a fight that we've all wanted to see for a couple of years already. No closer to happening. Errol Spence has still got to come back from his devastating car crash that he suffered. He's probably going to want a tune-up fight before he goes in with anyone of Crawford's calibre. And even if he didn't, he's going to need time for his body to recover. Hopefully he's getting that while the shutdown is going on. But then Crawford, there's been talk of him fighting the likes of Kell Brook and some other names. So that doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. Then we've got Canelo. Now, Canelo was supposed to fight Billy Joe Saunders. The fight was agreed. It was just about to be announced when the shutdown came in. Will he still fight Saunders? We don't know. The longer this goes on, surely the less chance it will happen. And there's talks already of DAZN pushing for Canelo's trilogy fight with Triple G to take place in September on the usual Mexican Independence Day weekend that Canelo likes to patronise, not in the negative form of that word. Will we see that in September? It still seems a bit early to have a mega fight with, you know, filling stadiums or anything like that. But could you put on a Canelo fight behind closed doors? And it's similar for all the sports megastars, the likes of Anthony Joshua as well, in that the money's just not going to be there without that live gate. Sure, they'll get loads from TV, pay-per-view, but not the same amount. Live gate plays a huge part in fights involving Canelo, who's appearing in stadiums, of course, and AJ the same. So it's going to be very hard for Canelo to have a fight behind closed doors. Now, if boxing's ready to go back out to live crowds, not just from the medical side and having the relevant medical personnel ringside, but also people having A, enough money to attend after, you know, not working for however long, and B, sufficient confidence that the virus has hit its only peak and they're not going to take a huge risk by going and mixing with thousands and thousands of other people at a live sports event, then perhaps it could happen. But September still seems quite soon. Could it go somewhere else? Perhaps, as Eddie Hearns talks about Joshua Pulev, instead of being at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, perhaps going to the Middle East, who've staged successful events in the past, not least Joshua's rematch with Andy Ruiz in late last year. That could happen. Could happen for Canelo, but I don't see Canelo going to the Middle East. But perhaps Mexico is an option. But then would Triple G want to concede such a level of home advantage, having already felt kind of hard done by on the scorecards in his first two fights with Canelo in the US? Hard to see. Billy Joe Saunders has said before he'd be willing to go to Mexico to fight Canelo. So maybe then that fight comes back into play for September. So many unanswered questions. But yeah, AJ against Pulev, could that happen in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or somewhere like that? I'd keep an eye on it. You know, Joshua's last fight was in the Middle East. It was very successful. They made a lot of money, got really good response generally as well. That could happen. Pulev's been waiting so long for his chance, he'd probably be willing to go anywhere. And it becomes a neutral territory in effect, or at least ostensibly. It's not him having to travel to the UK for the Joshua fight in a big Joshua-friendly stadium. So he might be quite happy about that. So maybe we'll see that before the end of the year. But is that really a mega fight? Most people see it as a routine defence for Joshua. Although a lot of people saw the first Ruiz fight as a routine defence for Joshua. So we'll have to wait and see. Fury Wilder is obviously loosely set for October. And I'm going to be speaking to Bob Arum later today, actually, and I can ask him the latest on that. But I spoke to Lou DiBella for the latest DiBella's Digest yesterday, and you'll see that over the weekend. And he didn't think it was likely at all that would take place this autumn. He called it the fall, I call it the autumn. Let's not worry too much about that. But yeah, he didn't think it would happen then. So it's going to be interesting, because if that doesn't happen, we could potentially see no mega fights this year since the ones we've already seen. So no future mega fights once the shutdown's lifted. What we could see though, on the positive side, is some kind of mid-level world title fights, more competitive fights, because everyone wants to get out there, want to attract viewers back in. We could see a lot of those. We could see them a lot on the same weeks. We could see a huge array of televised boxing to choose from, or even to be able to watch all of it if they don't clash. And we could see some fights that we wouldn't have seen previously, because everyone's so desperate to get out and make money and get boxing back on the road. So let's try and focus on that positive, but the worry is that we won't see any huge fights this year. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and I'll respond to some of them. As always, I appreciate your time. I'll be back with FLEXpectations, as always, next week, Thursday, 4:30 PM. And Reflections will be here Monday at 4:30 PM. Thanks a lot, and see you soon. Cheers.